Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today we're talking some Week 17 Championship Fantasy Football lineup advice here with 5 must-start running backs that you have got to have in your lineups. There are a lot of players this week that are not typically thought of as blue-chip fantasy football players that can have huge impacts in our lineups due to some great matchups and opportune situations. So, with that being said, drop down, give today's episode a like, and let's hit the intro, and let's get started. As always, if you're new around here to the SFS channel, drop down, click that subscribe button as well, and join the community. We have an awesome community Discord server available in the description of today's episode. You can get the invite link by heading down there. It's free to join. We interact, answer questions, chat fantasy all week long. It's a great time, so go check that out. Our first must-start running back for this week is Ronald Jones of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, filling in this week for Leonard Fournette, who is injured in 2 weeks ago's matchup in Week 15 against the New Orleans Saints. Ronald Jones, very talented running back, a player I have a lot of respect for. He's not quite the pass-catching asset that Leonard Fournette is for this Tampa Bay offense. However, what he is a physical downhill runner that can get the job done and have a explosive impact on this offense. Last week, he wasn't overly impressive, only averaged just over 3 yards per carry, 20 rushing attempts for 65 yards on the ground. Again, just over 3 yards per carry, and he only tacked on 2 receptions for 16 yards on top of that, but he did have a rushing touchdown. It wasn't an overly great matchup, though. What we liked last week, and the reason Rojo made the must-start list in Week 16 was the situation. Ronald Jones is by far and away the best running back remaining on this Tampa Bay roster, and the player who should be in lineups for this offense. And when you take into consideration the loss of Chris Godwin, Mike Evans' banged up injury, you're left with really Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, and Ronald Jones in this offense for TB12 to work with, and that's a depletion of talent. That means the remaining bodies out there on the field are going to be asked to do more, and they're going to be asked to have a larger impact and role for this team. So last week, again, the Carolina defensive front is not an overly advantageous matchup, but Jones was still able to put up top 24 running back numbers. This week, however, against the 32nd and dead last ranked New York Jets rushing defense, they give up the most fantasy points allowed to fantasy running backs. I love the situation. So again, we're not asking or expecting Ronald Jones to come in here and catch between 6 and 8 passes like we've been seeing Leonard Fournette do for the last 2 months that he's been the lead back in this offense. But Ronald Jones should see requisite amounts of volume head his way. 20 rushing attempts last week was fantastic. Even adding in those 2 receptions could get the job done as well. I expect a higher level of efficiency per touch for Rojo here in Week 17. And again, the opportunity to have maybe not even just a couple, but multiple goal line rushing opportunities that he could punch in for some very valuable 6-point plays. So Ronald Jones, definitely my top must-start for this week in terms of players that aren't blue-chip fantasy assets. He is a must-start for me. Damien Harris of the New England Patriots taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is another one that I think needs to be in lineups here this week. In Week 16, Damien Harris had a really strong game with 18 rushing attempts, 103 yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns against that stout Buffalo Bills defense. You know, this is a team and an offense that prioritizes the run game. They make sure they get enough touches to their running backs. A big emphasis or a big key here, something to not take too far out of context, is that Ramondre Stevenson was absent from this matchup. He was out with COVID in Week 16, opened up the door for a bit more volume and opportunity to head Damien Harris's way. But this week, the matchup makes it even more enticing for me to go out and put Damien Harris back in my lineup here, especially in standard or half PPR leagues. Now, if you're looking into a full PPR league and a full PPR contest here, this is maybe a situation that you're not as excited about because Damien Harris is not a running back that provides that additional reception value in a week in and week out basis. But what he can do is give you value in rushing attempts on the ground, similar to a Ronald Jones. These aren't two players we expect to have a high role in the passing game and to be overly involved in that facet of things. But Damien Harris, again, just like Rojo, I expect efficient numbers here against this against the Jacksonville defense because of what I expect New England's defense to do to a sputtering Jags offense. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to struggle. Bill Belichick tends to own rookie quarterbacks even into their second year of playing professional football. Trevor Lawrence's turnover differential has also been very lackluster this season. So if you're talking about multiple New England takeaways in this game, to me, that means more opportunities to run the football, control the pace of the game, control the tempo, the game clock, and have more offensive possessions than you would typically see from this New England offense. So I think that the culmination of what I expect the game script to be in this matchup, I also expect the Pats to bounce back in this game, of course, and get things back on track here. I think that adds up to a productive day on the ground, even if Ramondre Stevenson is back out there in the lineup for the Patriots. Javonte Williams, my number 3 must start for this week. There is a little bit of concern right now. Last week, the volume was not all that great for Melvin Gordon or Javonte Williams, who each only saw 7 rushing attempts on the ground against Las Vegas. That's very underwhelming numbers, very underwhelming performances from those two players. However, this is a matchup that we saw this Chargers backfield do very well in the first time around this season. Javonte Williams is one of the most physical and imposing players after contact in the National Football League. He actually leads the NFL in broken tackles this season. It's not Jonathan Taylor. It's not Delvin Cook, Derrick Henry. It's Javonte Williams, as a rookie who has been nearly splitting his touches evenly all season long with Melvin Gordon in that backfield. So very impressive numbers for him. I can't wait for him to get the keys to the offense next season and hopefully be a 3-down workhorse runner for this team. But again, this is a matchup that's all that great. And it's going to provide, again, the opportunity for efficiency. That's how you're going to rack up those yards very quickly. And you talk about these players getting a couple goal line opportunities. That's how you get from having these players at very solid floor numbers to increasing to that ceiling and boom potential here. And Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, respectively, both have the opportunity to do that in this game. Let's just go back 1 week, talk about the Texans playing the Chargers. Both of those teams were basically, they had 10, 15 plus players out with COVID last week. The Texans ran all over this Chargers defense. Rex Burkhead absolutely annihilated them. Yes, Rex Burkhead of all players. You would have thought he was Jonathan Taylor if I put JT's numbers up on the screen with like a blind resume test and then Rex Burkhead's numbers. You would think JT was Rex Burkhead, and you would think that JT was Rex Burkhead on a good day. So it was very odd. Rex Burkhead had 149 yards rushing and 2 rushing touchdowns. So just speaking to the volume and the amount of fantasy points that this Chargers rushing defense is allowing, they're among the worst in the leagues. They're in the bottom 4 to 5 in the group for fantasy points allowed to the opposing running back. One question I've got in the Discord chat this week is the relevance of the quarterback under center for this Denver offense. I think either way, there's a chance for success to be had here by this running back group between Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams. Obviously, Teddy Bridgewater was out last week. That meant Drew Lock was in the lineup. And unfortunately, the coaching staff really has to baby Drew Lock. They don't want him throwing the ball downfield because this team knows if they lose the turnover differential, they're probably going to lose the game. And Drew Lock is someone who's been a bit lax and a bit loose with the football throughout his career. So they're really trying to harness him in. They're not making this offense anything too spectacular. I was shocked that they did not run the ball more than they did last week because of the fact that Drew Lock was under center. But hey, you never know. Hopefully the coaching staff can learn and improve from that last week. But if he's back under center this week, the weakness of this Chargers defense is not the secondary. It's the front 7. It's that rushing defensive group, and I expect them to exploit that here, regardless if it's Teddy B or Drew Lock under center this week for the Broncos. David Montgomery here for the Chicago Bears, again, makes the must-start list this week, taking on the New York Football Giants. How about them Bears last week coming off an impressive win against the Seattle Seahawks? As time basically expired there, Nick Foles was able to make the comeback, tie the game up, or at least what looked like was going to be a tie up there. And then the Bears go for 2, and Nick Foles wins that game on a 2-point conversion pass. So quite the impressive comeback for Chicago. Obviously not what you want to see, your third-string quarterback coming in and do that. You want to see Justin Fields be the guy. behind that. But nonetheless, a win for the Bears, who are already eliminated from playoff contention. Montgomery, though, had a fantastic day. 28 touches total, 106 scrimmage yards, and a touchdown against the Seahawks, again in that one-point victory, 25-24. And this week, you got the Giants. And the Giants are more of a mess than Seattle was last week now. The matchup on the ground was probably a bit more favorable for the Bears than it will be this week. The Giants, however, are still among the bottom third of opposing rushing defenses for fantasy running backs. But nonetheless, I think that what's more enticing here is when you go back to that Damien Harris example with the Pats versus the Jags. The Giants' offense is such a mess, and what the Bears do have is a respectable defense. Now, the defense isn't nearly the level that's been in the past year, but what they can do is get Mike Glennon off the field. And if you can get Mike Glennon off the field, get your offense more opportunities to move the football down the field, put up points, that means more opportunities for David Montgomery. And if this coaching staff knows anything, they are at their best when they're running the football, when they're getting number 32 touches. And that's how we saw him come on so strong last season and end as a top 5 fantasy running back, because he was having these monster and ridiculous numbers because of how much they were giving him the ball down the stretch and because of the plays they were letting him have the opportunity to make. Now, David Montgomery has not been that same player this year. He has not had nearly the amount of boom games as we'd like to see. I would argue that the Bears offense has honestly taken a step backwards this season as opposed to taking positive steps forward in the right direction. But nonetheless, Montgomery is still the most talented player, or the player who should be most utilized in this offense. It's been a shame what we saw happen to Allen Robinson this season. By the way, as we mentioned, Allen Robinson, he is up for biggest fantasy bust candidate of the year. If you want to go check out the channel, make sure you click that subscribe button as always again. But if you go check out the community section of the SFS channel, you will see a series of 8 different polls for our Fantasy Football Awards show that'll be going up sometime mid-next week. I know a lot of you have Week 18 games, so I'm going to keep hitting up advice for you all and sending this advice your guys' way. So about a week and a half left of 2021 fantasy football content. Then we'll be moving on into 2022 Dynasty offseason content, which should be great, and obviously doing some NFL draft prep, which we'll be having a lot of coverage here on the channel for as well. So Montgomery, another strong option here this week. And then Rashaad Penny of the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Detroit Lions. This is actually a player who I've grown really fond of in the last few weeks since we've seen him kind of have that breakout performance. And we're starting to see Seattle get further and further away from running that committee-style offense that was really quite detrimental to the running back core, or at least the fantasy value that any one player could have in this offense. Now, Chris Carson, when healthy early on in the season, now he has not been healthy for quite some time. He was actually ruled out for the season a good healthy chunk of time ago as well. But then it was Alex Collins. We saw Rashaad Penny in the lineup. We've seen DJ Dallas. Now it seems like they're kind of honing in on Rashaad Penny. I had a little bit of a scare back in Week 15 when DJ Dallas's volume was increasing and Rashaad Penny's volume was decreasing. But then in Week 16, Rashaad Penny pulls back. He has 10-plus rushing attempts in the last 4 games, and he's out-touching DJ Dallas this past week by a significant margin. So that's all positive things to see here. And then you get to the matchup, the 29th ranked Detroit Lions rushing defense. On paper, that's screaming like we've got an excellent matchup here. I expect this to actually be a relatively competitive football game just out of the nature of how tough and how physical the Lions play. However, I do think Seattle will get the best of them here. Again, Rashaad Penny, 10-plus rushing attempts in 4 straight contests. So the better part of the past month, he's been seeing an increased level of volume and more usage in this offense. He does have 135 or more rushing yards in 2 out of those 4 contests as well. And it makes sense, right? Those were against Houston and Chicago, the lighter of the 2 matchups on that 4-game schedule. And then he had fewer than 40 yards rushing against the more difficult opponents on that schedule, San Francisco and the Rams. So if you take a look here at this 5th matchup is what's coming here this Sunday against the Lions. That would be back in that easier, lighter category of opposing rushing defenses. You'd expect Rashaad Penny to have a greater level of efficiency if that volume hovers around where it has been at in that matchup against Houston and then Chicago. I think you're getting yourself an opportunity here. He does have 3 touchdowns in the last 4 games he's played, so you're getting a little bit of a combination of a variety of things you like to see: volume, high levels of rushing yardage output, rushing touchdowns being put up on the board. So again, the lighter matchup, the involvement, the opportunity Penny's been seeing as of late, this could be a sneaky week winning play if you're able to use him in the right way. I'd say he's a lower end RB2 to a quality flex play in both standard and PPR formats. And again, I would keep your eye out for him this week. All right, there you have it. Those are my 5 must-start running backs for Week 17 action. It's championship week for a lot of us, so let's make sure we've got those lineups right. Put your questions and your comments down in the comment section below, and I'll get back to all of you guys. Again, one more time, go check out the community section on the SFS channel. And it takes like 30 seconds. Just vote quickly on the fantasy awards polls. And we can ultimately present those awards and have a good time and make a fun video out of that. So go check out the fantasy awards polls. Again, remember to click that subscribe button, drop a like down on today's episode, and ask me any questions you've got in the comment section below, or the free community Discord server, which can be joined in link form in the description of today's episode. So go check all that stuff out, and I'll see you guys there. Peace out.